Welcome back to the final segment of Cleaning Up the Mess. This is CNC3. Today we are talking of what Trinidad and Tobago can learn from Europe. Stelios, I was very interested in a comment you made earlier. Europe on the whole has the lowest vehicle emissions per mile driven, and I think some of the cleanest air quality in terms of air quality standards. What drives that? Now, is that the high taxes on gas?
Well, perhaps in the beginning. You know, taxes like subsidies. Perhaps it is the flip side of the same coin. But they tend to be effective only in the beginning of a phase. They are both signals rather. Like legislation is a signal. But now the drive is due to the innovation and the competitive edge the industry as such, as a whole in Europe, manages to have in respect and compared to the car industry all around the world. And we all know how, even for bigger industry, in Germany, I remember very well because I was in Europe at that time, when European Union put forward legislation for even bigger, heavier cars to abide by very low, very, very stringent emissions standards, Germany had protested in the beginning. Look at them now.
Look at you now. What do you say about that?
Well, we made our way, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Trinidad and Tobago, with its natural gas reserves, has not seriously looked at energy efficiency at both the household and industrial level. European countries are much more dependent, as you just said, on external sources for most of the energy to take it much more seriously. Should we even be bothered by this? I mean, after all, we have a very cheap energy.
Well, two answers, if I may, on that. First of all, for how long? And then if, let's say, in 20 years from now, not talking about Ryder Scott and that, but
yes.
if in 20 years you start realizing that, well, you know, something, we don't have what drove us here, will you still have time to diversify away, or you should better start preparing? But the other big reason is because, as I said before, by trying to boost your chances with environmental protection and climate change, you're actually making your own economy more competitive.
Okay, well, you know, we also have extremely, I'm ashamed to say, high per capita emissions of carbon dioxide due to being energy-based. But this has been driven primarily by companies based in the EU. To what extent would the EU be willing to take responsibility for some of the emissions in Trinidad and Tobago? Well,
I don't know if this question is as productive for a country like Trinidad and Tobago as it would seem to be appealing. Because if you do that, as we said before, you would do it in your own interest. You would not do it because it is demand-driven from your export markets. You do it because you identify your own interests in this. So you need, in my humble view, to research to see if by studying perhaps better your fiscal systems.
I think what I was trying to ask you is that, is the EU willing to take any responsibility for our emissions based on the energy sector?
We are doing this already, because when we are setting targets at international fora, we did that already from the Kyoto Protocol, but also in Copenhagen. And I'm sure we're going to do it in Cancun, in the run-up to Cancun at the end of the year. We are always trying to make the case ourselves first and to champion the case of less developed countries and of small island states. They always have an exception and more room for maneuver. And you can always count on us to do that. But I repeat, this is not a reason not to do your own efforts.
Yes, you want us to take some responsibility for ourselves, and I agree with that. Maria, bio-waste, including household waste, is governed by EU directives. In Trinidad, most of our waste goes into our landfills. Germany and Spain have large plants which convert this waste into compost. Is this financially viable for us? What can be done with the compost in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, in my opinion, financially, as we have said at the beginning, maybe some subsidies need to be established, but what we need, all of us, to ask ourselves is where are we going? So at some point, effectively, technologies will develop and gas and oil will not exist forever for Trinidad and Tobago, but for the rest of us. So maybe this is, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, I find it very similar to the case we've been going through, meaning let's learn from mistakes and achievements from other countries. And then again, this day maybe the use of biomassa, it's taking its first steps, but it's already working for many economies. So if it's working for many economies, why not for Trinidad and Tobago?
Christoph, you wrote